My name is Julia Vance. I'm 28 years old, and for years, I thought my life's mission was to finally earn my family's respect. We were gathered at the massive mahogany table in our Atlanta estate, a showplace in Buckhead that reeked of generations of inherited wealth, but I wasn't there to play their old money games. My true passion was my startup, a tiny tech company building a revolutionary platform for remote medical diagnostics. It was my life, my vision, and the most meaningful thing I'd ever built. Yet, to my parents, Carol and Robert Vance, and my older sister, Tiffany, my life's work was a childish, embarrassing venture I should have abandoned years ago for something respectable. I sat there in my simple cashmere sweater and dark jeans, the obvious outlier. They, meanwhile, were draped in Chanel and bespoke suits, their smiles smug and condescending. The air was heavy, not with celebration, but with impending judgment. The forks scraped against the porcelain, and then my mother, Carol, leaned forward, her voice cutting like a shard of ice. "Julia, we're done bailing you out," she snapped, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. "We are not your bank anymore." My father, Robert, nodded curtly, his eyes cold and distant, viewing me as some worn-out charity case they were finally tired of funding. My sister, Tiffany, a wildly successful luxury real estate broker, laughed, a sharp, poisonous sound, and chimed in, saying I'd never match her seven-figure success. They genuinely believed they were delivering a necessary lesson, putting the failure of the family back in her place. I stayed silent, my expression neutral, but my phone was buzzing in my coat pocket. It was a message I knew held the power to flip their entire gilded world upside down. They had absolutely no idea what was coming. They were clueless that I held the keys. Not just to their monthly allowances, but to their entire legacy. If you think their arrogance lasted, folks, you're in for a shocking surprise. This is the story of how their laughter turned to silence and how I took back control, a necessary pivot from dreamer to director, as the expensive chilled crab appetizers were served. My mother's voice turned utterly glacial. "Julia, your little tech project is a complete waste of our time and, frankly, our family's reputation," she declared, slicing through the hum of clinking glasses. Her disappointment was palpable, as if my mere ambition was a personal insult to her society standing. "You're nearly 30, Carol continued, folding her hands with aristocratic precision. "When are you going to stop playing with code and get a real, income-generating job?" Dad didn't miss a beat. He set his wine glass down, his face stern like a judge delivering a verdict. "Your sister is out there closing multi-million-dollar deals on condos downtown," he said, gesturing toward Tiffany, who beamed across the table. "That, Julia, is what success looks like. Not some app that hasn't made a single dime." His words always stung, but tonight, they bounced off me. I kept my face utterly neutral, my hands resting calmly in my lap. I was not about to give them the dramatic reaction they craved. Tiffany, of course, couldn't resist twisting the knife. She tossed her blonde hair, her heavy gold bracelets catching the light, and launched into a detailed, loud story about her latest triumph, a major deal on a historic midtown loft conversion. "Just locked down the paperwork for the entire project," she bragged, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "8 figures, Julia. That's the kind of capital you'll never see chasing your silly, abstract dreams. You're still living off scraps, aren't you? Always needing a family handout." She punctuated it with a short, cutting laugh that made my stomach twist, but fueled the fire in my gut. "We've been far too soft on you," Mom sighed, pursing her lips. "Tiffany is right. You simply cannot keep leeching off us forever." The accusation landed like a physical blow. But I didn't flinch. I had heard this tired, condescending script at every family gathering, every holiday, for the past 5 years. They truly believed I was the weak link, the inevitable failure who would never measure up to their polished, high society standards. Dad leaned forward, his voice low but weighted with false authority. "It is time you stood on your own 2 feet, Denise. No more safety net. You need to learn the value of a dollar." The sheer irony wasn't lost on me. Robert Vance spoke as if he'd built his fortune with his hands, not from the ancestral 20 million trust fund that paid for this mansion, their fleet of luxury cars, and their entire cushioned existence. But I stayed silent, letting their arrogant words wash over me like a cold, cleansing wave. Tiffany was not finished. She sipped her Chardonnay, her eyes glinting with amusement. Honestly, maybe you should take a page from my book. Get a real estate license. Start small. Actually contribute something to this family for once. You're not cut out for this tech nonsense. It's embarrassing. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around the edge of the antique dining chair. Their words were familiar, yet they cut deeper tonight, because I knew they were speaking from a position of absolute, arrogant ignorance. They saw me as a burden, a failure, a dreamer who would never amount to anything real. But I wasn't here to argue or beg for their long, denied approval. I felt the comforting weight of my phone in my pocket. A silent, powerful promise of what was about to unfold. They thought they held all the cards, that their money and their judgment dictated my future. The dining room buzzed with their confidence, their smug certainty that they were totally in control. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, please like this video right now. And if you want to see how this story ends, the ultimate vindication, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Share your own stories of overcoming doubt in the comments below. The grand reveal, who holds the keys, when everyone raised their glasses for a toast. A patronizing toast to Tiffany's continued success. My phone buzzed again. I discreetly glanced at the screen, my pulse quickening as I saw the name Eleanor Stone, the attorney and trust fund manager. Her text was brief, almost cold, but profoundly heavy. Ready for disbursement meeting, Miss Vance. Need confirmation. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the full, immense weight of what was coming settling over me. Their sharp words, their smug confidence, the years of dismissal. It all came roaring back. They thought they'd finally put me in my place. The truth was about to hit them like a freight train. I caught the eye of Chloe Miller across the room. My best friend and co-founder, Chloe had been with me through every late-night coding session and every demoralizing pitch meeting. She knew the stakes. I gave her a subtle, barely perceptible nod, and she slipped away from her conversation, joining me near the bar cart. "They're in for the shock of their lives," Chloe whispered, her voice low but buzzing with excited anticipation. "They don't know who's really calling the shots." Hi, I leaned closer, my tone steady, my eyes sweeping over Carol, Robert, and Tiffany, who were laughing conspiratorially with their society crowd. They've been living off my decisions for years. Time to wake them up. The massive dining room doors swung open, and Eleanor Stone entered. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished marble floor. She carried a sleek leather portfolio, her face calm and utterly businesslike. She was here to settle a decade-long score. The high society chatter immediately faded. Guests sensed a dramatic shift in the air, a disruption in the natural order of the Vance household. Mom's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing suspiciously at the interruption. Dad set his wine glass down with a heavy thud, his jaw tightening in annoyance. Tiffany, mid-sentence, froze, her gaze flicking dismissively toward the stranger. "Miss Vance," Eleanor said, her voice cutting clearly through the large room as she addressed me, "Julia. I need your final approval for the quarterly trust fund disbursements." She opened the folder, revealing official documents stamped with the Vance family trust seal. Every head turned. The silence was thick with confusion and growing panic. Dad let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "This is nonsense," he boomed, attempting to regain control. "Dinas, Julia managing the trust. She's just a dreamer with a failing app." Mom chimed in, her voice tight with rising fear. "You're mistaken, Eleanor. Our daughter doesn't handle our finances. She can't even handle her own." Tiffany snorted, crossing her arms. "What is this? Some kind of pathetic prank?" she sneered. "Julia controlling our money. She's a nobody." Eleanor Stone didn't flinch. She slid a document across the table, pointing to a highlighted line of dense legal text. "Miss Julia Vance has been the sole, irrevocable trustee of the 20,000 million Vance Family Trust since her 25th birthday," she announced, her words clear and unshakable. "She oversees all assets, your home, your vehicles, and the monthly allowances of 20,000 each. No funds are released without her signature." The room instantly froze. Dad's face went from ruddy to an ash gray, his manufactured confidence crumbling into dust. Mom's hand flew to her diamond necklace, her eyes wide with undisguised terror. Tiffany's smirk vanished, and the crystal glass in her hand trembled visibly. Eleanor calmly closed her folder, gave me a curt, respectful nod, and turned toward the door. "I shall await your decision, Miss Vance," she stated, her heels echoing as she left. The silence that followed was suffocating. Their stunned faces were locked on mine. I stood up, pushing my chair back. My voice was steady, sharp, and finally, completely free. For 3 years, I said, meeting their eyes one by one, I have approved every single dollar you've spent. Your cars, your yacht club fees, your vacations, Tiffany's condo deals. All of it rests entirely on my signature. You thought you were in control, but it has always been me. Their world was unraveling before their eyes, and I was just getting started. The consequences, a financial blackout, as the family dinner dissolved into chaos. I stepped away from the table, my voice low and firm as I dialed David Hayes, the head bank manager who handled the trust's transactions. Put an immediate, absolute hold on everything, I stated, my tone calm but utterly resolute. No disbursements for Robert Carroll or Tiffany Vance. Effective immediately. David's response was immediate and professional. Understood, Miss Vance, it's done. I returned to my seat, my face giving absolutely nothing away. Tiffany was the first to notice the financial blackout. She frowned at her phone, her perfectly manicured nails frantically tapping the screen. What in the world is this? She muttered, her voice rising in pitch. My Amex card has been declined. She swiped again, her cheeks flushing crimson as the error message popped up a second time. This is impossible. I just used it this morning. Her eyes darted to me, raw suspicion creeping in. I simply sipped my water, unfazed. Dad's brow furrowed, his fork pausing midair. What's going on, Tiffany? He demanded, his voice sharp with irritation. She shoved her phone toward him, her voice trembling with rising panic. My accounts are showing a security freeze, and my biggest real estate deal, the one for the new lofts, it's collapsing. They're saying the initial development funds never cleared. Her words came fast, laced with sheer terror as she scrolled through emails from her business partners. Mom's hand flew to her chest, clutching her necklace. This must be a mistake. She gasped, her eyes darting between Tiffany and me. Our accounts are fine. We have always been fine. But her voice wavered, betraying the seismic doubt creeping in. Robert, what about the house? The property taxes? The mortgage? Is that safe? Her question hung in the air, heavy with primal fear. I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady as I finally delivered the crushing blow. The Buckhead mansion belongs to the trust, I said, meeting their terrified gazes one by one. And I control the trust. Without my signature, there is no money for the taxes. There is no money for the mortgage. There is no money for anything. Adaid's face went completely white, his usual blustering confidence replaced by a flicker of abject dread. That's ridiculous, he stammered, but his voice lacked any conviction. We don't need your permission to live our lives. Tiffany jumped in, her tone desperate and accusatory. You're bluffing, Julia! You can't just cut us off! We have our own money, our own deals. But her trembling hands clutching her phone exposed the lie. Mom's voice cracked as she tried the familiar rote of emotional manipulation. Julia, be reasonable. We have always supported you. This is just a misunderstanding. Her words were empty and hollow, a pitiful attempt to rewrite years of deep disdain. I shook my head, my expression cold and unyielding. For 3 years, I've signed every single check that paid for your luxury cars, your exotic vacations, your entire social status, I said, my voice cutting through their protests. You thought you were calling the shots, but it was me, all along. The truth landed like a final blow, silencing their excuses. Tiffany's phone buzzed again, an email from her biggest client. She gasped, her face crumpling as her carefully built, glamorous empire began its terminal collapse. Dad tried one last time to regain control, his voice rising in volume. We don't need your handouts, he insisted, but his tightly clenched fists told a completely different story. We have managed just fine without you. I simply raised an eyebrow, letting the silence stretch. They could pretend all they wanted, but the crushing reality was sinking in their lavish lifestyle. Their social power, their entire world depended on my signature. Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her composure finally crumbling. Julia, you can't do this to your own mother, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I didn't waver. Their panic was palpable. Their confidence was shattered. And I felt no pity. They had made their choice when they dismissed me, mocked me, and systematically tried to break me. Now, they were facing the long, delayed consequences. The full betrayal. The dining room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. My phone pinged again. this time with a detailed email that shattered the last vestige of my emotional restraint. I glanced at the screen. The sender was a venture capitalist I'd pitched to fiercely last year. The subject line read concerning feedback regarding your credibility and operational status. My blood ran cold as I scanned the message. Tiffany had contacted key investors, spreading malicious lies that called my startup a scam, a desperate grab for cash to fund a failing, over-leveraged lifestyle. Her sabotage had cost me a critical, life-changing funding round, nearly killing my company before it could even get off the ground. I looked up, my eyes locking onto Tiffany. You told investors my startup was a fraud, I said, my voice low but sharp as a newly honed blade. Her face went pale, her mouth opening to offer a desperate, stammering denial. But I held up my phone, the email glowing like undeniable evidence in a courtroom. This is from one of them. They heard it straight from you. The guest's whispers ceased, all eyes now fixed on us. Tiffany stammered, her hands trembling uncontrollably. That's a lie! She snapped, but her voice cracked, betraying the obvious guilt. Mom's eyes darted to Tiffany, then back to me, her face a sick mix of guilt and sheer defiance. Julia, Tiffany was just protecting our family's reputation. She insisted, her voice trembling but firm. Your startup is risky. She was looking out for all of us. Dad nodded quickly, his jaw tight. She didn't mean any harm. She was trying to keep our name clean. You know how gossip spreads in our social circles. Their words hit me like a devastating punch to the gut. They knew what Tiffany had done. They knew she had actively tried to ruin my legitimate dream. And they were still standing by her, shielding her monstrous betrayal. Their loyalty was not to family, it was to their own fragile status, their own financial comfort, their own twisted narrative. Tiffany seized the opening, her voice desperate but defiant. I had to. Julia! Your app was a joke, dragging our family down. I was saving us. Her excuse was flimsy, her panic clear as she clutched her phone, her carefully built empire crumbling with every passing second. You all knew, I said, standing taller, my voice unwavering, cutting through their pathetic excuses. You knew Tiffany lied to investors, tried to destroy my life's work, and you are still defending her. You thought you could break me. But I'm the one who's been holding you up for 3 years, and I am done. I paused, letting the word betrayal linger, heavy and undeniable. No more allowances. No more trust fund. Not a single cent. Mom gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Dad's face crumpled, his usual forced authority gone. Tiffany's phone slipped from her slick hand, hitting the table with a dull thud. Their world was collapsing. They had chosen Tiffany's lies over me, protected her sabotage while dismissing my dream. And now, they would face the full, unmitigated consequences of that choice. Their panic was complete, their world utterly silent. I stood up, ready to make my final, absolute move. The air in the dining room was thick, the clinking of glasses and the forced laughter of the guests long replaced by a heavy, profound stillness. Mom, Dad, and Tiffany sat frozen, their faces etched with a mix of shock, defeat, and dawning terror. I had absorbed enough of their hollow apologies and their transparent attempts to rewrite the past. It was time to show them that I didn't need their approval, their wealth, or their world to succeed. I straightened my shoulders, my voice ringing clear and steady through the quiet room. The 20 million Vance family trust is legally mine to manage. I announced, locking eyes with each of them, forcing them to look at their true reality. And effective immediately, I am redirecting every single cent of the principal into my startup. My tech company, the one they had mocked and called a joke, was about to become my future. You get nothing, I finished. Not now, not ever. My words were final, cutting through the silence like an executioner's blade. Mom gasped, her hand clutching her chest, but I felt no regret. This wasn't revenge, it was the purest form of justice. Dad's voice finally broke the quiet, low and strained. Julia. The mansion. He pleaded, his eyes wide. If you don't release the funds for the property taxes, they'll seize it. The bank will take our home. His admission was raw, a desperate crack in his polished, entitled facade. The Buckhead mansion, their lifetime symbol of status and wealth, was now a massive, impossible liability. I met his gaze, utterly unflinching. That is not my problem anymore, I said. You made your choices when you dismissed me. Tiffany's head snapped up, her eyes wild with complete panic. You're destroying me, she shouted, her voice thin and hysterical. My clients are gone. My contracts are dead. I am nothing without my reputation. Her hands shook as she frantically gripped her phone, as if it could somehow conjure up a lifeline to her crumbling empire. The woman who had built a career on arrogance and million-dollar deals was unraveling before our eyes. I felt no pity. She had actively tried to sabotage my dream, and now her world was collapsing entirely under the weight of her own malicious actions. Mom's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "Julia, we're your family," she pleaded, her eyes searching mine for any trace of mercy. "You can't just abandon us." But her words rang hollow, stripped of all meaning. They had abandoned me first. With their mockery, their favoritism, and their ultimate betrayal. I shook my head, my resolve now an impenetrable shield. "Family doesn't tear each other down," I stated. "Family doesn't lie to investors to ruin someone's life's work. You did that, not me." I took a deliberate step toward the door, turning my back on the wreckage I had caused. "I don't need your approval to succeed," I said, the words carrying the weight of years of silent pain. "I've built my company from the ground up with my own work, my own vision. The trust fund is simply a tool now, one I will use to prove you wrong." My startup wasn't just a hopeful dream. It was my reality, my irrefutable proof that I could stand entirely on my own. I didn't need their validation, their money, or even their name to make it. The other guests around us were silent, their eyes darting between my family and me. Dad sat motionless, his hands folded, staring down at the table like it held answers he couldn't find. Mom's shoulders slumped, her face etched with devastating resignation. Tiffany's fingers hovered uselessly over her phone. They had underestimated me, thought they could control me, but now they understood the truth. Their world had rested on my shoulders all along. I paused at the door. "You thought you could break me," I said, the final words delivered with quiet authority. "But I'm the one who was holding you up, and I'm done." Their silence spoke volumes, a stark, final contrast to the scorn and laughter that had filled the room only hours ago. They had lost everything: their wealth, their status, their power, because they had chosen betrayal over belief. As I walked out, the Atlanta skyline glowed through the mansion's windows, a towering reminder of the city where I was about to carve my own magnificent path. I didn't look back. They faced the inevitable consequences of their actions. Tax notices piling up, clients walking away, their carefully curated lives falling apart. I was free, ready to build something bigger than their small-minded world, fueled by my own strength and the trust fund that was finally mine to control. 6 months later, the true measure of success, 6 months melted away, and I stood in my new startup headquarters, watching the Atlanta skyline light up. The sleek, modern office space buzzed with creative energy. Screens glowed, team members brainstormed, and my company's logo shone proudly on a wall-mounted monitor. My tech startup had become a rising star in Atlanta's competitive scene, with business journalists calling it a game changer in remote diagnostics. The 20 million trust fund, once merely a lifeline for my family's staggering extravagance, now fueled an innovative company that was entirely mine, built from late nights, hard choices, and a visionary purpose they had ruthlessly mocked. My heart swelled with pride, not just for the profit, but for the profound satisfaction of proving them all wrong. Meanwhile, Carol and Robert's world had shrunk into obscurity. Without the trust fund's support, they couldn't possibly pay the exorbitant property taxes on their sprawling Buckhead mansion. They were forced to sell it at a dramatic loss, trading their glittering, panoramic view of the city for a cramped, anonymous apartment on the far outskirts. I heard through my former friend Chloe Miller that they now lived modestly, scraping by on Robert's dwindling personal investments and Carol's reluctant part-time consulting gigs. The life of gala dinners and country club memberships was a distant, painful memory, replaced by budget grocery lists and second-hand furniture. Tiffany's fall was even steeper and more humiliating. Her once glamorous real estate career had completely collapsed after her biggest, most influential clients walked away, spooked by her frozen accounts and the catastrophic cancellation of major deals. With her reputation in tatters, she had been forced to take a desk job at a small, regional property management firm, shuffling paperwork for a mere fraction of her former income. The designer handbags and exclusive parties were gone, her social status reduced to whispered cautionary tales at industry events. She had tried calling me once, leaving a shaky, tearful voicemail I never returned. Her malicious betrayal, spreading lies about my startup, still stung too deeply for reconciliation. Chloe, my best friend and co-founder, stood by my side through it all. As we reviewed our latest user data, showing massive growth, she grinned, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We did this, Julia," she said, her voice warm and sincere. "Not them, not the trust, just you and me." I nodded, eternally grateful for her unwavering support. Our startup wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, with new venture capitalists lining up and users downloading our app by the tens of thousands. Chloe's steadfast belief in me had been my anchor when my own family tried desperately to sink me. Looking out at the dazzling city lights, I thought about the profound lesson I'd learned, a lesson I want to share with everyone listening today. The valuable lesson: never, ever underestimate someone simply because they don't conform to your expectations. My family thought they could control me, dismiss my dreams, and actively sabotage my work. But they were profoundly mistaken. Self-reliance was my path to real, authentic success. Not their money, not their empty approval, but my own grit, my vision, and my refusal to break. I built something lasting, something they could never take away, because I bet everything on myself when no one else would. Their downfall wasn't my fault, but it was their direct, inescapable consequence. Carol and Robert's arrogance, Tiffany's deep, active betrayal. They brought this humiliation on themselves. They saw me as a failure, a dreamer who would never measure up. But I turned their doubt into the cleanest, strongest fuel I could find. The trust fund, once their crutch, was now my tool to reshape the future. I didn't need their validation to know I had won. To everyone who has followed this story, thank you for listening. Your support truly means the world. And I hope my journey resonates with the resilience you've shown in your own lives. Never let anyone make you feel small. Your own strength and vision are more than enough to build your path to success. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about a time you had to stand up to doubt, or a dream you are proudly chasing today. We are a community of strong survivors, and your stories matter. If you have enjoyed this journey of boundaries and self-discovery, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to join me for more empowering stories just like this one. Here's to building our own magnificent futures, regardless of who doubts us.